took me to the American history section?
Yes, to the right around the coast.
We may help, son?
Oh, we've got a theme to write for school on any period of recent American history. Gee, I don't know what to pick.
There's plenty to choose from here. Up to 1914, I guess that's pretty old stuff for us now. 1914 to 1918, that's not much fun. 1918 and 1930, now those were the days. Things were really fine.
Frederick Lewis Allen. I'll cover the manners and customs of the night. Robert Q. Lewis. Broadway, movies, theater, nightclubs. That's for me in any period. Alan Preston. The lighter moments isn't me. This is Red Ball. Not so old red yet. We had sports in the 20s, too. I'm Elmer Davis. I'll tell you about the political climate of the 20s. It was quite a party when we heard that the first war of our time was over. The news was a bit premature, and most of us figured that there wouldn't be any more wars. We were ready for peace, and when the steamship George Washington moved down the North River, taking President Wilson to Europe and the peace conference, we thought the world was about to be made safe for democracy.
Yes, that's what we thought. But meanwhile, we wanted to be amused. To thrill the crowds, or maybe promote a cure for bunions, we had the daring human flies, second-story men making their way up in the world. The baseball scoreboard was easier to understand, and a lot more exciting than anything happening in Europe, which, after all, was a long way off. But Europe was right with us in the latest French fashion, especially the nightgowns, which were very daring. There was a little number in mischievous satin designed for an intoxicating bride. Its lines, both modern and Parisian. Women's legs came into the open for the first time, but their heads stayed under. Arguing with the cop got you nothing. All this added up to a new age beginning, and people were ready for it. They were ready to play, too. Crowds jammed the resort, where they were amazed by the death-defying stunts of wing walkers, who never knew which end was up.
It looked as if the new airplane was going to be more than an attraction for weekend crowds. The Navy's NC-4 had flown all the way from the United States to Great Britain in only 54 flying hours. And there were the lighter-than-air craft, like the British R-34, and realized that aviation had plenty of brilliant wartime pilots to draw upon. Men like Eddie Rickenbacker and Bert Acosta. You knew that the air age must really be coming.
At this point, the people voted for something hopefully called prohibition. And when the saloons and bars closed up early in 1920, it caused a great deal of downright grief. The trouble had started a good many years earlier, when a firm old lady named Carrie Nation had raided the saloons with a hatchet. She won, and when the Prohibition Amendment became the law of the land, enough good hard liquor went down the drain to make you feel like crying. It looked like the end, the absolute end of liquor in the United States.
By that time, the soldiers had come back to joyful welcomes, even though most of us were trying to forget the war.
War heroes like Sergeant Alvin York got a big hand from the crowd. And the top brass, General Blackjack Pershing and Admiral William Sims, were showered with honorary degrees. The veterans had organized the American Legion, which held its 1921 convention in Kansas City. As usual, the Legionnaires took the town by storm. With them was a good display of generals and admirals, foreign and domestic, men whose names everyone knew, like Jacques of Belgium, Beatty of England, and of course, Pershing.
Even while the victory celebrations were going on, here and there the old belligerent spirit began to speak less worthy of it. In a few cities there were riots, race riots, with mobs trying to get their hands on prisoners. Nearly always the police and National Guardsmen managed to keep the crowds under control. Others were not so easily controlled. A secret organization, the Ku Klux Klan, spread its poisonous influence throughout a large part of the country. And a man called Mr. Zero, in order to dramatize the helplessness of the jobless, held auction sales of human labor before crowds of fascinated Bostonians. The struggle between capital and labor rose to its peak in a series of prolonged and savage strikes. Prices were high. Men demanded increased wages, which many employers refused to give them. There were many war horses of labor agitation, national figures like old Mother Jones, who believed in a fight to the finish. But there were also a lot of hard-headed, practical negotiators among the leaders of organized labor, men like William Green and Phil Murray of the United Mine Workers, John L. Lewis. The wave of post-war strikes came to a crisis in Boston when most of the police walked out, leaving the city unguarded. A volunteer police force was formed and the militia was called out to patrol the streets. Once peaceful Boston seemed like a city under arms. Then onto the scene stepped Calvin Coolidge, governor of Massachusetts. He said, "There is no right to strike against the public safety by anybody, anywhere, anytime." That statement made Coolidge famous overnight. Not long after this, the wave of strikes died out. Public weariness, aided by a break in prices, ended it. And after a conference, labor boss Samuel Gompers and industrialist Charles Schwab managed a feeble smile together.
There was a good deal of violence during the years directly after the war. The worst damage was caused when a bomb went off in Wall Street just outside of J.P. Morgan's office. Experts examined the bomb fragments, but no one ever found out who set off the bomb, though the public believed that revolutionists were to blame. It was noted that the statue of George Washington, just across the street, escaped the blast unscathed. So did J.P. Morgan, who was vacationing in Scotland at the time. Even before the Wall Street explosion, there had been nationwide raids on communist headquarters, a result of the general belief that Bolsheviks were plotting to overthrow the government. There was not much difference in the public mind between socialists and communists, and the public seemed glad to have any type of radical brought to trial. In many cases, juries found the prisoners guilty, and then, if they were aliens, they were ordered deported. during this Red Scare that two men have been for the murder of a paymaster in South Braintree, Massachusetts. At first, the question of their guilt or innocence attracted little attention. But before they were executed, years later, the case of Sacco and Vanzetti was to articles had been started on their way home. The hysteria ended, but the melody lingered on.
If you don't like the stars in old glory, if you don't like the red, white, and blue, then don't anchor in the story. Don't find the hand and
Well, that tune came straight out of vaudeville. Vaudeville was in its golden era. Still, a lot of the small-time, four-a-day acts were routine but good. Big time, you saw the great stars, like Harry Houdini, never equaled in his line. The vaudeville circuit was the best training a lot of famous actors and actresses ever had. When they reached the top in vaudeville, they were in.